You know what surprises most people? The best part usually starts in the first 24 hours. Not months later, not next season, right away. Because the moment you decide to start guessing, something changes immediately. Not in the garden at first, in you. There's a kind of pressure many people carry without even realizing it. It sits quietly in the backyard. Every time you pull into the driveway, every time you walk past the front window, every time friends come over and you glance outside before opening the door, you look at the garden and think, something feels off. Not terrible, not a disaster, but not the space you imagined either. You've probably told yourself 100 times, I'll deal with it soon, maybe this weekend, maybe when work calms down, maybe when the weather is better. But underneath that delay is something deeper. You don't know where to start. You don't know what actually matters. You don't know if spending money will solve it or just create another mistake. So nothing happens. And that uncertainty gets heavier over time, not because the garden is the biggest problem in your life, but because unfinished things quietly drain energy. They sit in the back of your mind, they follow you, and then the moment you decide to stop guessing, that weight starts to lift. Because now there's direction. Now there is clarity. Now instead of 10 confusing questions in your head, there's a path forward. You realize it may not be as complicated as you thought. It may not require tearing everything out. It may not need endless weekends of work. Sometimes it just needs the right eyes on it, the right first step. And for many people, that relief alone is worth it. To walk outside and feel possibility instead of frustration. To look at the space and think, finally, this can be fixed. To know you're no longer stuck. And once that feeling begins, you're ready for the next part. Because what happens after clarity is where things start getting exciting. In the first 24 hours, you begin to see your space differently, not as a problem to hide from, but as something that finally makes sense. For a long time, you may have been looking at the symptoms, a plant that keeps failing, a corner that never looks right, an area that always feels unfinished no matter what you add, too much shade here, too much sun there, soil that stays wet too long, another spot that dries out too fast, and you notice these things, but they feel disconnected. A list of random frustrations. But in the first 24 hours, the pattern starts to reveal itself. You begin understanding why one area struggles. It isn't bad luck. It's drainage, timing, root competition, light, or placement. You understand why another area feels too empty. It may not need more plants at all. It may need structure, layers, balance, or a focal point. You understand why some things never really took off. Not because you chose the wrong plant, but because the conditions were never right for it to succeed. And maybe most importantly, you understand why it always felt like more work than it should be. Because when a garden is set up wrong, even simple maintenance feels exhausting. You're constantly correcting instead of enjoying, replacing instead of building, reacting instead of guiding. And suddenly, what felt confusing starts to feel simple. Not because everything is magically finished overnight, but because now you know what matters most. You know what to fix first, what to leave alone, what will give the biggest return with the least stress, and that kind of clarity changes everything. Because once the space makes sense, your next decisions become easier. Your time gets used better, your money goes further, and for the first time in a long time, the garden starts to feel possible again. And if your life is already full, this matters even more. Because when your schedule is packed, delay feels reasonable. You tell yourself you'll deal with it later, when work slows down, when the kids are less busy, when you finally get a free weekend, when life feels calmer. But for the most people, that calmer season never really arrives. Something always replaces it. Another commitment, another bill, another task, another month gone. And while you're waiting for the perfect time, you're losing something quietly valuable. You're losing evenings you could have enjoyed outside. You're losing summers where the garden could have felt welcoming instead of unfinished. You're losing the simple pride of coming home to a space that feels cared for. You're losing weekends to thinking about it instead of enjoying it. And the longer it gets, or longer it waits, the heavier it becomes. Because now it's not just a garden, it's another unfinished thing sitting in the back of your mind. Another reminder that something needs attention. Another source of low-level stress every time you look at it. That's why you don't need another project. You don't need a complicated makeover that steals the little free time you already have. You don't need more random purchases that end up in the wrong spot. You don't need 6 weekends of trial and error, digging, moving, replacing, and starting again. You need clarity. You need someone to help you see what actually matters first. You need a plan that fits your real life, your real schedule, and the time you truly have. You need something that makes the garden easier, not another burden. Because the real cost of waiting isn't only money, it's another season passing while life moves fast. And the space that could have brought you peace keeps giving you stress instead. Sometimes the smartest move for a busy person is not doing more alone, it's getting the right help now. You walk outside, and instead of seeing problems, you start seeing potential. The same space is there, the same garden, the same yard, but it feels completely different now, because before, every glance came with frustration. You notice what wasn't working, the patchy area, the empty corner, the plants that looked tired, the jobs you kept postponing, and each time you looked at it, it quietly took something from you. Energy, confidence, motivation. But now, something has changed. You stop thinking, what's wrong here? And start thinking, now I know what to do. That shift is powerful, because uncertainty drains people far more than the effort does. When you don't know where to begin, even small tasks feel heavy. But when the next step is clear, action feels lighter. Suddenly, that empty corner becomes an opportunity. That difficult bed becomes a simple fix. That tired entrance becomes the easiest place to create impact. You begin imagining what the space could become. Morning coffee outside, a cleaner front entrance, summer evenings with family, friends visiting and noticing how good it feels, and that sense of ownership starts to return. Not ownership of more work, ownership of direction, ownership of progress, ownership of a space that reflects the life you've already built. Because once you feel momentum, everything changes. You stop avoiding the garden, you start engaging with it, you stop seeing another burden, you start seeing something worth investing in, and often, the biggest transformation doesn't begin in the soil. It begins the moment you realize, or you believe, the space can finally become what you wanted all along.
Now imagine a few weeks from now, warmer evenings, longer days, the kind of evenings that disappear quickly if you're not paying attention. You step outside with a coffee in the morning, and instead of seeing jobs waiting for you, you feel a sense of calm, the space feels settled.
Fresh growth is coming in, the beds look cared for, things are beginning to fill out naturally, nothing is shouting for attention, nothing feels neglected. Later that day, after dinner, you sit outside with family. Maybe the kids are playing, maybe the house is finally quiet for a moment, and the garden feels welcoming and alive. Not because it's extravagant, not because it costs a fortune, but because it feels right. It supports the life happening around it. It gives something back to you, a place to breathe, a place to slow down, a place that makes home feel more complete. Not perfect, but working. And working for you. That means less time fixing problems, less money replacing things that never thrived, less mental clutter every time you look outside, more enjoyment, more pride, more movements you actually remember. Because seasons move quickly here. Before long, summer will be in a full swing, and many people won't realize what they missed until it's already halfway gone. They'll still be planning, still postponing, still looking at the same unfinished space, but you could be living in it, using it, enjoying it. That's the difference between waiting for a right time and creating it while the opportunity is here. If you've been putting this off, maybe this is your sign. Not pressure, not urgency for the sake of urgency, just a quiet reminder that sometimes the things we delay the longest are the things that would improve life the most. Because the first step usually isn't as hard as people think. It often feels bigger in your mind than it is in reality. You imagine weeks of work, big costs, endless decisions, but many times it starts with one clear conversation. One honest look at the space, one smart next move, And the first 24 hours can change more than expected. Not because everything is finished overnight, but because confusion gets replaced with direction. Stress gets replaced with momentum, and hesitation gets replaced with possibility. So if you've been waiting for someday, maybe someday is simply the moment you decide to begin. I'm Darrell, and I'll see you in the garden.